It's been a year since my daughter and her husband moved in with us, and now I've been blessed with a cute grandson named Thomas. Today is the day my mother-in-law meets Thomas for the first time. My husband Ken walked in, guiding my mother-in-law Carol by the hand.
Everyone, I brought Mom with me.
Oh, welcome, Grandma.
My daughter, Rachel, who had always been close to Carol since she was little, had been eager for her to hold her newborn baby ever since she gave birth. Carol lives separately from us. Considering Carol's old age and her future, we couldn't help but feel anxious, but it was all for Carol's well-being. Carol is naturally highly spiritual and has a hard time feeling too much in places where she is involved with many people. Rachel's eyes lit up with anticipation at Carol's arrival. Encouraged by Rachel's expectant gaze, I walked over to Carol with Thomas, who I had been holding. "Welcome, Carol. This baby is—" I couldn't finish my sentence, "your great-grandson." Because at that moment, Carol clutched her chest and started to suffer.
Ouch.
"What's wrong, Carol?" Just moments ago, Carol had been smiling warmly, but the moment she saw Thomas, her eyes widened, and she collapsed to the ground. "What happened, Carol? Are you okay?"
It hurts. So painful. That baby is, no.
Carol desperately tried to convey something. However, in stark contrast to her, Thomas remained innocently smiling in my arms. "My name is Joy Smith. I used to work as a caregiver, but now I am retired and live with my husband Ken and my daughter's family. Our peaceful life with the four of us is very fulfilling, but there are a few things that concern me."
I wish Grandma could live with us.
My daughter Rachel sighed sadly as she sipped her coffee. "Yes, currently, we're living separately from my mother-in-law, Carol. Carol is turning 91 this year. Given my line of work, I can't help but worry about not being there to support her, especially if something happens." "Yes, but—" I remembered Carol's reaction when I suggested that we live together. "She's more comfortable on her own, and she wants to relax. It's what she wants." Carol is remarkably spry for a 91-year-old. Her letters, which arrive with the seasons, usually detail her mountain climbing adventures. She once told me that she finds peace in an environment where she can soak up nature's energy. And Carol seems to have a strong sixth sense, especially sensitive to people's emotions. As Rachel and I enjoyed our slightly indulgent coffee, we started reminiscing. "Remember when you went missing back in kindergarten, Rachel?"
What? Really?
Rachel sounded surprised. She was probably too young to remember much from that time. But Ken and I were frantically searching for our missing daughter. Even strangers on the street were saying, "We'll help you." We called neighbors, walked around the kindergarten and the neighborhood, but we couldn't find you anywhere. Ken suggested we talk to Carol, and then Carol. This was over 10 years ago, so Carol was even more energetic back then. When we consulted her, she said, "That's terrible," and quietly closed her eyes. I wondered what she was doing, but felt an atmosphere that told me not to interrupt, so I stayed silent. A few seconds later, Carol clutched her chest in pain, as if she could feel it herself, and said,
She's in a dark place. It's lonely and very painful.
When we searched the dark places like Carol suggested, we found Rachel stuck in a hole by the embankment, unable to move because you'd twisted your ankle.
No way. I don't remember any of that.
Afterward, when we asked Carol how she knew, She just said, I could feel Rachel's fear. As I finished the story, Ken, who had been silently reading the newspaper, looked up and smiled nostalgically.
Yeah, I remember that happening.
She must have an inspiration. Grandma's amazing.
Ken had told me about Carol's inspiration, but I didn't believe it until that incident. I always thought such things were just fiction. But Carol's behavior at that time was genuinely uncanny, and since then, I've come to accept the strange things she says. Because of Carol's sensitivity to others' emotions, I can't push too hard for her to live with us. With such sensitivity, it makes sense she'd prefer being alone. Living with others might actually stress her out and make her health worse. But this situation can't continue forever. I sighed deeply, pondering what to do. And that wasn't my only worry. Since Rachel and her husband Sean got married and moved in with us a year ago, our front door has been repeatedly vandalized with spray paint. Another graffiti. One day, when I stepped outside to weed the flower bed, I saw bright green graffiti on the front door. Cleaning such extensive spray paint alone was too much work, so I called Ken for help as usual. Ken, could you help me clean off this graffiti?
Oh, again? Sure, give me a moment.
The graffiti was frequent, and we still didn't know who was responsible. We even had a graffiti cleaning kit ready at home. This time, it was just a messy smear on the door, but sometimes there were malicious messages like curse or unforgivable.
Who on earth could be doing this?
We asked around the neighborhood, but no one had seen the culprit. Our house graffiti problem was well known, and neighbors would even knock on our door to inform us if they noticed before we did. Having Carol over in such a situation wouldn't be peaceful. I know, let's install a security camera. I suddenly thought and suggested to Ken while cleaning the graffiti. We couldn't just let this continue. We had to take action to solve it. Ken agreed with my suggestion and went to the hardware store that day to buy and install a security camera. After the front door was vandalized again, we checked the camera footage. It was early in the morning when most people were still asleep. The camera showed a man in black clothes covering his entire body.
Is that guy?
Do you know him? Because of the mask and hat, his face was hard to make out, but he was clearly not someone we knew. Yet, I saw Rachel's face turn pale. When I asked if she recognized him, she nodded. I think so.
I think it's John, a classmate from my college. He confessed to me before I started dating Sean. I turned him down, but he kept stalking me afterward.
I see. Remembering that time, Rachel began to tremble slightly. Hearing the story, Sean looked grim but gently patted Rachel's back in support. It seems the graffiti culprit's unrequited love for Rachel had turned into hatred, leading to these actions. I don't know what exactly happened between them, but Rachel isn't the type to play with people's emotions. The sharpness in his eyes, filled with madness and hatred, sent chills down my spine even through the video. Ken must have felt the same, as he spoke sternly.
We should contact the police. Even if it's just graffiti, it's a nuisance, and it could escalate.
You're right, let's do that. It's better to act before something worse happens. We had the video and several photos of the graffiti as evidence. We decided to take the footage to the police. After explaining the situation, the police treated it as a malicious act and issued a strict warning to the perpetrator. As Rachel suspected, the culprit was indeed named John, and he harbored intense hatred towards Rachel and Sean. John's parents found out about his behavior, leading him to quit his current job and move back to his hometown. Since then, the graffiti incident stopped, and we finally felt a sense of relief. However, the uneasy feeling inside me didn't completely go away. Shortly after, we discovered that Rachel was pregnant. She had been complaining about a lack of appetite despite not feeling unwell. Having received the news over the phone earlier, I warmly welcomed Rachel when she returned from the hospital. Rachel, congratulations!
Thank you, Mom.
You need to be careful from now on. No strenuous activities, no heavy lifting. Take it easy at work and keep a calm mind.
The nurse already told me that, over and over.
Rachel seemed a bit tired of hearing it, but her expression couldn't hide her joy. As we discussed the future, the living room door opened. I looked up to see Ken, who had been outside, returning home.
Rachel, don't hesitate to ask for help if you need anything.
Ken said this cheerfully, having overheard our conversation from outside the room. And next to him stood Carol, with a joyful smile on her face. I had asked Ken to go and pick her up.
Congratulations, Rachel.
Grandma.
When I called Carol in my excitement, she was thrilled and said she definitely wanted to visit. Her enthusiasm was clear even over the phone, which made me happy too, so I asked Ken to bring her over. Carol grasped Rachel's hands tightly, tears welling up in her eyes.
You'll face tough times ahead, but a lovely baby will be born. I'm so excited. Living long enough to see my great-grandchild's face is such a blessing.
Encouraged by Carol's words, Rachel nodded happily. A cute baby, that's wonderful. Is that also your inspiration?
Oh, it's not my inspiration. Just a little dream of a great-grandma.
When I asked, Carol winked playfully. Yes, you're right. Any baby would be adorable. As I silently regretted my clumsy question, I remembered the graffiti incident. Oh, Carol, you know, I mentioned to you someone was vandalizing our house?
Yes, I remember.
We found out who it was, called the police, and the vandalism has stopped. So you don't need to worry anymore. Won't you live with us? John has gone back to his hometown, and our neighbors are kind and peaceful people. There's no reason for Carol to worry, but she shook her head firmly.
I couldn't intrude on your family time. I'm fine living as I am.
Intrude? You're part of our family, Carol. I tried to persuade her, but Carol didn't budge. After that, Rachel's belly grew steadily, and without any major issues, she gave birth safely. The baby boy was named Thomas. He had the same adorable features as Rachel. Remembering when I gave birth to Rachel, I realized how much she had grown to now experience the same thing, and I couldn't help but cry with emotion. Rachel was eager to show Thomas to Carol right away, but I advised her not to overexert herself just after giving birth, so the visit was set for a month later. Thomas is so cute. Peekaboo. When I played with him, Thomas laughed innocently. Today is the day Thomas meets Carol for the first time. To help Rachel, who had returned home from the hospital, I tried to assist with childcare as much as possible. Above all, the fact that I had a grandchild made me incredibly happy.
Thomas already loves his grandmom so much.
I hope so. Thinking that I had finally become a grandmother filled me with deep emotion. While talking with Rachel and playing with Thomas, Ken returned with Carol.
I brought Mom with me.
Oh, welcome, Grandma.
Rachel had wanted Carol to hold Thomas since the day he was born. When Carol finally arrived, Rachel's eyes sparkled with excitement. Encouraged by Rachel's expectant look, I approached Carol with Thomas in my arms. "Carol, this is your great-grandson." I couldn't finish the sentence. "Thomas?" Because at that moment, Carol clutched her chest and started to suffer.
Ouch.
"Carol." Just moments before, Carol had been smiling warmly, but the instant she saw Thomas, her eyes widened and she collapsed. "What's wrong, Carol? Are you okay?"
Ouch. It's painful. No.
"What do you mean? Thomas is not okay?" Sweat beaded on Carol's forehead, as if she were enduring real pain. She was clearly in distress. Wondering what was happening, I looked at Thomas in my arms. He was just laughing innocently, amused by the adult's panic. We tried to comfort Carol by rubbing her back and helping her sit down, but her color didn't improve. I told Rachel, who looked worried, to wait, and I guided Carol to another room where she seemed to calm down a bit.
I'm sorry. Can I go home? Please don't misunderstand. It's not Thomas's fault.
"I understand. I'll take you home." Though Ken had brought her and Rachel had been looking forward to today, we couldn't let Carol suffer like this. I decided to drive Carol home as she requested. "Carol, are you feeling better?"
Yes, much better. I'm so sorry.
Carol's house is in a somewhat isolated area at the foot of a mountain, away from the residential neighborhood. There were few houses and little foot traffic, so Carol seemed more at ease and sighed in relief. "You don't need to apologize, but what happened earlier?" Carol wasn't sick. For her to suddenly clutch her chest in pain, there had to be another reason. I offered her some warm tea to help her relax and asked. But Carol seemed reluctant to recall the moment. She lowered her eyes and hesitated to speak.
Well, when I looked at that baby, I felt a terrible sensation.
A terrible sensation? Seeing Carol in such pain gave me a very bad feeling. It was the same feeling I had when we discovered the graffiti culprit, a lingering unease in my heart. The terrible sensation Carol describes must be due to her inspiration. If that inspiration reacted as soon as she saw Thomas. I tried to keep calm and immediately called Ken. "Hey Ken, can you and Sean check around the house?"
What happened?
He was probably reading the newspaper. Ken's voice sounded surprised at my sudden request. "I think there might be a suspicious person around. I have a really bad feeling."
Got it. We'll check it out.
Ken had experienced Carol's inspiration since he was a child, so he probably felt the same way I did. Understanding my concern, he quickly called Sean, told Rachel to stay inside, and went outside. As I heard the front door open over the phone, my heart started pounding uncontrollably.
I'll call if anything happens.
Ken said as he tried to hang up. But the next moment, I heard Ken's shout echo through the phone.
Hey, what are you doing there?
I heard Ken's footsteps running, followed by angry shouts as he and Sean confronted someone. Then, the unpleasant sound of metal clashing.
How dare you? Rachel, you betrayed me and had a baby. Don't think you'll be the only one happy.
The voice I heard was not Ken's usual calm tone, but a man's voice filled with hatred and malice. "Ken, what's happening? Ken?" I clung to the phone desperately, but the noise made it hard to understand what was going on. After the tumultuous sounds, the other end of the phone finally went quiet. While I was on the phone with Ken from Carol's house, Ken had seen John hiding in the shadows of our home. John had been carrying multiple knives. It's obvious what he intended to do. Fueled by anger, Ken and Sean confronted John, who was about to go on a rampage. Luckily, Sean had experience in judo, and they managed to capture John without anyone getting hurt. The police were called immediately, and John was arrested. As he was being taken away, he directed his anger at Rachel, shouting, "It's all your fault, Rachel. You traitor." This confirmed that John harbored resentment towards Rachel. Thanks to Carol, thank you so much. If you hadn't noticed, who knows what could have happened. After the incident settled, I visited Carol's house again. This time, Rachel and Thomas were safe, thanks to Carol's abilities. The pain Carol felt at that time was the intense hatred directed at Thomas from John. When I brought her a gift and bowed my head in thanks, Carol, as humble as ever, shrugged and said, "You're exaggerating."
I didn't do anything. It was you, Joy, who took action, and everyone else who helped catch the culprit.
No, that's not true. If you're thanking everyone, then you should include yourself too, Carol. I was truly relieved that everything turned out okay. The thought of something happening to newborn Thomas or Rachel, struggling with her first-time motherhood, was terrifying. We comforted each other and felt a sense of relief wash over us. But one day, when the incident seemed to be behind us, the doorbell rang ominously. "Yes, who is it?" Given the recent events, I thought it might be the police or mailman, so I opened the front door without much thought. I regretted it immediately.
Hello, we're John's parents. Is this Rachel's home?
A couple I didn't recognize stood there, wearing unsettling smiles. "John."
We deeply apologize for the trouble our son has caused.
John was the man who had tried to harm Rachel and Thomas. Why were his parents here at our house? How did they even know our address? A cold chill ran down my spine.
We came to apologize directly to Rachel and Thomas. May we come in?
What were these people talking about? We wanted nothing more to do with anything related to the culprit, and it seemed unnatural for them to come to our house just to apologize. The incident had only just happened. Wouldn't such matters usually be handled through lawyers or the police? There was no way I could let these two meet Rachel and Thomas. "I'm sorry, but my daughter is deeply traumatized. I can't let her meet with you in such a state. Please leave."
Please, we only want to apologize.
John's mother leaned in, placing her hand on the front door I was about to close. Her serene smile only made me feel more uneasy. "No, thank you. Your apology means nothing. If you truly care about my daughter, please stay away from her forever." When I responded firmly, John's mother widened her eyes in shock. Then, she suddenly let out a piercing scream that could probably be heard by the neighbors.
Oh my, I knew I wasn't wrong. How dreadful to think that my precious son might have married the daughter of someone so rude. I wondered what kind of person would reject my son. It must have been your daughter who had the problem. She must have deceived him.
"Excuse me." Feeling uneasy about their sudden change, I firmly closed the door and locked it. If they continued to bother us, I decided to call the police. Clutching my phone, I felt cold sweat trickling down my spine. John's parents lingered in front of the house for a while, but eventually they seemed to give up and left quietly. I was so relieved that I sank to the floor. Even though the culprit had been caught, it might still be too early to feel completely safe. I decided to share this with my family. Actually, John's parents came by today.
What?
I brought it up in a stern tone during dinner when everyone was together. Rachel's face turned pale with worry, and Ken and Sean furrowed their brows. They insisted on coming in to apologize directly to Rachel and Thomas, but I sent them away.
That's unnerving.
From those parents, I didn't feel any genuine intent to apologize. I just couldn't figure out what they were thinking, and it was deeply unsettling. Trying to lighten the darkening mood, Ken said decisively,
Maybe we should move. It's not good that they know our address.
I agree. This place was very comfortable, but knowing that John and his parents knew our address always brought unease. Even if we're safe now, there's no guarantee for the future. As I nodded, Ken continued,
And Joy, you've been worried about Mom too, haven't you?
What you mean? Ken winked, as if he understood everything I'd been concerned about. This trait reminded me a lot of Carol. Carol, why don't you live with us? After we successfully moved, I visited Carol's house again. The house was very quiet and ideal for spending one's later years alone, but it seemed a bit too lonely to me. Our new place is in a nature-rich area, and I think you'll like it, Carol. Besides, through this incident, I realized something. I had always thought I needed to support Carol. I saw her as someone I needed to care for. But it's not just that. Our family can help each other no matter the differences in our roles. It's more fun when the family is together. Having you around makes Rachel and Thomas feel secure. I rely on Carol. That's the truth. When I said that with a serious expression, Carol gave a gentle smile, as if she understood everything.
Joy, you're stubborn.
So are you, aren't you?
Maybe so.
Feeling a bit amused, we both started to laugh softly. Being similar, we would manage well together.
All right. Taking care of my great-grandchild might not be so bad.
And so, the series of events came to a close, and Carol moved in with us. Our 4 generations would live together in peace and harmony, though nobody knew yet that Thomas would grow particularly fond of Carol, much to the dismay of Sean and Rachel.